You found the Backup Wrap Up, your go to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we tackle the questions every small business needs to ask when choosing a cloud backup solution. Picking the wrong backup product can cost you big time, both in terms of money and lost data. We're going to cut through the marketing noise and give you real practical advice about what matters. Immutability that actually works, following the 3-2-1 rule, and making sure that you don't get killed by hidden costs. Prasanna and I break down exactly what you need to look for, what to avoid, and why cloud backup makes so much sense for most small businesses. Whether you're shopping for backup right now or just want to make sure that your current solution is solid, this episode should be a big help. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss that there were no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this podcast. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. Hi, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy who wishes that he had my television, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis, and I don't know. I don't think I wish I had your television.
I think you do. I think you do. You don't want to tell me how bad you want my television.
If I had the room for a TV that big, yes.
You don't have room for a 98-inch?
No. Curtis got a new toy for Christmas.
Yeah, I did. Curtis bought himself a new toy for Christmas. Let's face it. Curtis saw this, and the whole story is just crazy. I won't even tell. What's funny is literally that I have a history of buying stuff that's big and not fully planning it out. This was possibly the best executed of all of the things, because I thought about how bad some of the other ones went. But the idea was to get it up on the wall, get it mounted on an articulating mount, by the way, because it's 100 pounds. Mm-hmm. To get it on a fully articulating mount that would allow me to angle it and stuff. Yeah. Which, for the record, the mount itself is called the Beast, and it was $200 for the mount, and to get it on that mount and functioning, and get the wall repaired, because the wall had a previous thing in there. Get the wall repaired before my wife gets back, because she was at her mother's, and so that whole plan, it went flawlessly. I prepped the wall. I studded out the wall because it had a big hole in it before. I restudded the wall. I got the drywall guy in there. The drywall guy got the drywall going, and I got it painted. I actually planned ahead with a person to borrow their truck and another person to help me.
I know. I was actually impressed at how much thought went into this.
Yeah, and then I, because time was of the essence. My wife was coming back the next day. And not that my plan was just, there's a television. That was the plan.
Yep.
And everything was fine up until what?
You hung the TV and realized it doesn't work.
Yeah. So the new TV didn't turn on after we hung it. So
it was not anything in your control. Right?
No, not anything in my control. It was DOA. Yeah. Never even thought perhaps I should turn it on before I try to hang it. And in fact, the second one, we didn't try to turn it on before we hung it, right? So we.
And not only did you not try it before you hung it, you also tossed all the packaging materials.
I did,
as well.
Because the easiest way to get a 100-inch screen 100-inch monitor out is to chop the box up, right? To slice it down the side, because it's not like you're going to lift it up out of a box the way normal boxes, right? So I did. I sliced the hell out of that box. So the box was destroyed and everything. Yeah. So I went and got another TV.
Yep.
And I was going to keep the box, and then I was going to, and then again do the swappy swap.
Yep.
Again, arrange for the truck, arrange for the helper, and everything was fine until my wife called me in the midst of this, saying that she was coming back up in the morning versus in the evening, and so she walked in on us mounting this gigantic TV. During which I got exactly what I expected, which is, do you know what you're doing? which is just what you want to hear when you're holding a 100-inch TV, which you have to hold in order to mount it properly. Like, it has to be lifted beyond shoulder height.
Yeah.
And it's 100 pounds.
Yep. And it's top heavy, and so you don't want it to...
And it's top, all the things, yeah.
But it's up,
But it's up and it's amazing.
So I think here's what everyone wants to know.
Yeah.
How is it?
It's amazing. I should put did you see the thing I sent you this morning?
Yep.
Yeah, I should put that up. This is how much bigger the TV is versus the previous TV, and which I've always thought was a 65-inch because I bought it used, and now turns out it was actually 58-inch. And so how much bigger is a 98 than a 58? It turns out it's much more screen, right? And also I have a Samsung Q990 soundbar, which is a really good soundbar. And so the connection of those two things is just an amazing home theatrical experience. But anyway, like I said, you wish you had my TV.
Yes. I do wish.
So the topic of today, and by the way, I'll just tell you, if you're looking for me to just name companies, that is not going to be the way this podcast is going to go. That's generally not what we do. It's going to be what are the types of things that you're going to be looking for if you're a small business and you need a cloud backup company. And yes, both you and I used to work for a cloud backup company, but this is not going to be, hey,
pick vendor X.
Just pick that one, right? But there are things that you need to think about. And I first wanted to start with the question. So I am of the opinion, and I think you share this opinion, but I wanted to talk about that opinion. I am of the opinion that a cloud backup service is the way to back up a small business, or a person, right? Versus the alternative, versus buying a backup product, installing it on your a machine of some type, or a VM if you're in the cloud. Versus doing that.
Can we clarify slightly?
You can clarify all you want.
So I think in many cases, it depends what your workload is and where you're running it. Right?
So I will preface my statement, assuming it can meet your requirements, then cloud backup is the way to go.
Yes. And I agree with that. And the only other thing I want to also clarify is you said downloading, installing on your device, which I think there's still a use for that. It may not be managing the backup service and everything else. That I 100% agree should move to the cloud, but there still may be things that you are installing locally onto your device in order to be able to back up that device.
Right. I meant like installing backup software on a server. Yeah. That's now your backup server. Right. Basically what I did for the first half of my career.
Yep. Don't do that.
Helping people to install a company that is now no more as of last week, right? Veritas. Yep. I installed a lot of Veritas. Net Backup is still around, but and Backup Exact is still around, but it's now.
I think it's important though to also point out that back in those days, the workloads that a small business was running is very different than the technologies and what's available today and how they operate their business.
I'll kind of agree with that. I'll say how's this? I'll say it in a slightly different way, because all those workloads are still there.
Yeah, they're
right?
operating differently.
Well, and even if, like, it depends on how far we go back. Obviously, virtualization changed a lot.
Yeah.
But the cloud changed a ton,
Yeah.
right? The existence of the cloud as a place to put your IT and as a place to buy IT services.
Yep.
The existence of SaaS changes everything.
Yep.
Right? Even more so, it changes everything in the backup world.
Yeah.
Even more so than the creation of the cloud as we know it, basically cloud computing.
Exactly. And then I think the other important, sorry, I keep going on about this, is when you say cloud, though, you don't necessarily mean just public cloud, right? You could also be referring to like an MSP who is providing
a cloud backup service. I would still call that a cloud backup service, an MSP.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good with that.
I mean, a cloud backup service might not be running in what we think of as the public cloud. It could be running in a private cloud.
Yeah. But I think the key takeaway is you're not managing the backup infrastructure. You're not deploying it. Someone else is managing all of that for you.
Right. And why do I think that?
Because no one wants
Why
to
do I
that.
think that the cloud is the way, that a cloud backup service is the way to back up, especially a small business or an individual?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is just all those, like that use case of small businesses and individuals need to back up their data. If they have to deploy all the infrastructure, they're going to cut corners, or they're going to leave things out, or the cost is going to be extremely high that they're just going to be like, hey, I can't do this.
Yeah. So creating and, designing and installing and configuring and then managing a proper backup system, whether on-prem or running in a cloud instance in your cloud account, is a lot.
Yep.
Right? I built an entire career out of it. People misconfigure that stuff a lot. Yep. They often over-engineer. They either have way more hardware than they need or way less hardware than they need. Right? Also, it's difficult to design it to be properly secure. It's very easy to design it in a way that it's easily attackable. And we can talk about that for a minute, because that's really it used to be that the number one problem was, I got this much data and I got this much time and I can't get from A to B. That was the number one thing.
Physics.
Both either from the backup or the restore. What were you about to say?
Oh, physics.
Yes, physics. Physics. I used to say it all the time. Physics was my number one enemy. The problem with physics is it doesn't argue. Like, it's like, hey man, I'm physics, right? Like I just had a thought. It was a company that is not around anymore, but they were one of the .com companies back in the day. And they were having real trouble backing up something. And they're like, the thing's over here and we're trying to get it over here. And I was like, just curious, what's the pipe, right? And it was going across the internet. I'm like, what's the pipe? And they're like, oh, we have a fractional T1 line. And I just remember doing the math. I'm like, yeah, well, this is physics. The problem is physics. You can't get from there to here with that much data and that little bit of pipe. That used to be the problem.
Yeah.
I think that problem has been solved primarily by a lot of design changes in backup software. Number one being deduplication, right? That deduplication changed. It didn't change the laws of physics, but it addressed the laws of physics by allowing you to back up a much bigger amount of data over a much smaller pipe.
Yeah.
Right. Dedupe and basically progressive incrementals.
Yeah.
What were you about to say?
That the second part was what I was going to say as well. That improvements in the technologies that allow you to do backups more efficiently.
Yeah.
Right. I think also goes a long way, even without deduplication, because that does help. But I think like incremental backups, whatever method you want to pick, synthetic or non-synthetic, right? Take your pick.
Yeah.
But all of those, I think, significantly helped in improving backup performance.
Yeah, I guess when I think of dedupe, I think of dedupe as the method to create the incremental backups. But you're right? It's a combination of the fact that we're able to do incremental forever now without restore forever. That incremental forever has been around for a while.
Yeah.
And there have been products that do incremental forever, and they did it to tape.
Yep.
And incremental forever to tape means restore forever from tape because you're going to load so many. I remember doing a restore with an incremental forever product, and it was like, gosh, it wasn't even that much data. It was, I don't remember the actual numbers, but I remember thinking this should take a few hours, and it took a few weeks because we were, doing restore forever. I just remember that restore was because the number of tapes we had to load and the fact that we only needed one file from this tape and two files from that tape. That I never thought that was a good idea. But now where we have disk primarily as the backup medium and we have dedupe as a helper, the fact that, we can back up really, really large amounts of data. The only thing then we need to design is we need to make sure we figure in the restore aspect of it.
Yep.
Because just because we can back up, a petabyte over the internet doesn't mean we can restore a petabyte over the internet, right?
Yeah. And
go ahead.
I know you were talking about sort of backing up data, right, and pushing it out. But I think also now for a lot of small businesses and individuals, they're leveraging, like we talked earlier, a lot of SaaS services.
Yeah.
So they're not even running Exchange on premises or they're now on premises.
Yeah, they don't have the same reasons that we had back in the day. So basically I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea from a cost perspective. I think it's a good idea from a risk perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective. I think that you're leveraging that company's expertise, and then literally all you have to do is install the agent, right? Or some are even agentless, right? Yeah. But all you have to install is the agent or connect the appropriate connector, and they are specialists in how to back up that thing, and you just need to allow it to do its job in most cases, right? You just need to basically get out of its way and say things like how often you want to back it up,
how long you want to keep it for,
what kind of RTO and RPO you're expecting, that sort of thing. So I just think it's a good idea. So what would you think if I'm a small business, and I will add, if I'm a dude in the house with, a handful of computers, what's the first thing that I need to, if I'm wanting to narrow down the list of, because I Googled cloud backup companies for small business, and there's, I don't know, 50 of them out there. How do I narrow that list down from 50 to a handful?
Well, I think one of them is, do they actually back up the applications or the workloads that you are looking to support?
Yeah, there's no point in having a conversation about how awesome their backup is if they don't back up your Mac or they don't back up your Microsoft 365 or VMware or whatever it is that you use as a platform. If they don't support it, there is really no point in having a conversation. Yeah. Because what I really want you as a small business, what I really want you to avoid is this. I did a LinkedIn survey last week or 2 weeks ago that just finished a couple days ago. And it was, how many backup products are you using in your environment?
72.
Yeah. And I was just looking at it. 30% of the respondents said 3 or more. 12% of the environments said 4 or more.
Wow.
Right? So 38% said 1. Yeah. So good on them, right? And 62% said more than one backup product. Why do I care? Why do I not want you to run more than one backup product?
Well, as a small business, you probably don't have the time to understand how to operate 20 different backup products when you have 1,000 other things to do.
Yeah.
And learning each one, being an expert, takes time. So pick what works, what would support most of your environment.
Yeah, and again, I make a lot of blanket statements, and this is one of them. I would rather you have a not as amazing backup product that handles all your platforms than two really amazing products that handle all your platforms, right? Just my personal preference because of risk and complexity and all of that stuff standpoint. Now, again, I go back with as long as the product meets your requirements, right?
Yep.
If it can't do the job, that's a different discussion. But I'm just saying, too many times we pick that product and this product because they have really cool features that aren't requirements.
Yep.
Right? They're like, man, this one also makes my morning espresso. That would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not really a requirement, right? And so I would rather you buy one decent backup product that meets all your requirements. I would never want you to buy a product that doesn't match your requirements. But yeah, so the very first thing, I agree with you. The very first thing to do is to make sure, well, at least first see if there is a product that handles all of the platforms that you use, right? It's very possible you will not find a product that does all the platforms that you use. In which case, it's that which case it is time to go to Plan B, right? Which is more than one backup product.
But don't start with the assumption that you need the best of breed for every single workload.
Yeah. And so I would rather like if you pick like best product for Microsoft 365, best product for VMware, best product for I don't know, Salesforce. Those are three different products. You could do that. I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right. But what you might end up with is a company that's really good at SaaS backup and a company that's really good at on-prem backup.
Yep.
Or a company that's good at Amazon backup, right? You might end up with two or three that you might end up having to do that because of the number of platforms that you use, because there are so many platforms. Do you remember when we interviewed that IT manager and they told us that their company was using how many
50 plus.
SaaS? What was that?
I think it was 50 plus, right?
Oh, it was way more than that, dude. Yeah. It was 400.
Oh my gosh.
It was 400 SaaS products that were being used in production at their company by like two people. Most of them were being used by like one guy, and then one woman over here is using that product, and then you got four people, and you got a little team over there, and
and it's funny
India and what's that?
Because being on the other side, like as a consumer of IT resources, right? We always are like, oh, we need this tool because it solves my needs. It's what I need to do. And it's the best of the breed for all the things I need to do. But then you never think about the poor IT person who's like, what am I going to do now with this additional SaaS app? And that's how you end up with like 400.
Yeah. And so, so just to go back, try to find a product that meets, your need. Try to find the least number of backup products to support the number of platforms that you do. And I do think that SaaS is going to be the death of you. Yeah. Right.
And I think the other thing is make sure you know your requirements, your needs versus your wants, because it's easy to snowball and be like, oh, I want everything. It's like when you go like building a house or buying a car, it's like, oh, I really want to check all the boxes, but then it's like, oh, that comes with a big sticker price. Do I really need this? Do I not? Like, what do I really need? Yeah.
I'm going to say the next thing, after we've make sure we have products that handle the things that we do, and we minimize the number of those products as much as possible, is to look for actual immutability, right? Why do I say actual immutability?
I'm going to disagree with you on this, but that's okay. We'll go through it.
Oh, you think something else is more important than the fact that the backups might actually exist when you need them? You think something's more important than that?
Yes.
Okay. I can't wait to hear what it is. So, all right. So, man, I'm dying to know. But
so
we're going to talk about
immutable.
We're going to talk about my idea first.
Yeah, immutability.
So, what do I mean by actual immutability?
This is that your data cannot be deleted before the prescribed retention time.
By
Anyone.
anyone.
Or anything.
Or anything, including you.
Yeah.
If you cannot delete the data before its expiration period, then that's as good as you're going to get from an immutability standpoint. If you, as a super user, are allowed to delete data, that means your account is the target from a cybersecurity attack standpoint.
Yep.
Because if they can get in there and they can use MFA exhaustion to get in as you, and even if, as much as you may be good at cybersecurity, I will just say, as a small business, you're probably not very good at cybersecurity. But even if you are very good at cybersecurity, and I consider myself pretty decent from things I know I'm not supposed to do, and yet I've still done dumb stuff.
Yep.
Right? I've still clicked on links that I shouldn't have. I've still, I fell victim. And so if somebody gets in as you and they can delete your backups, you might as well not have made them in the first place.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say actual immutability is there are a lot of companies that advertise immutability that don't meet that requirement.
Yep.
Immutability should be a binary condition like death or pregnant, right? You're either dead or pregnant or you're not, right?
But there are certain things, like I know we've talked, that if someone has physical access, all bets are off.
Correct. If someone has physical access and a torch, right? Which is another reason, by the way, from a especially small business perspective, cloud backup is the way to go, because the physical access is a lot bigger deal to get than it is when it's a small business, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Now that we've done that, what do you think is more important than immutability?
I think that making sure that there are copies of your data out there to meet the 3-2-1 rule.
So I'm going to agree that is very important, but I'm going to argue that if one copy doesn't exist, it's still like no backup happened. I will agree. We need to make another copy, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying we want to follow the 3-2-1 rule. Is what you're saying?
Yep.
Yeah. And I've both hardened and softened somewhere with the 3-2-1 rule. So my repeated sort of research into the original 3-2-1 rule, which we had, by the way, the guy who coined the term 3-2-1 rule on the podcast. The original is considered one of the three copies. That's the one thing that I have softened on a little bit. The other is the two needs to be on two different types of systems. And again, considering that one of them is on the original, the other being on a cloud backup meets the two, right? A lot of people are like, well, if I have two copies, but they're both in the cloud, that doesn't meet the two of the 3-2-1 rule. But the one is the easiest when using a cloud backup system. The easiest to meet is the one, right? The 3-2-1 rule. One being make sure that one of the copies is somewhere else, right? We used to say off-site. Yeah. Off-site doesn't really apply in a lot of cases, but just make sure it's somewhere else.
Well, the reason I bring this up is if we look at a lot of the cloud backup that say some of the vendors offer natively, they don't follow the 3-2-1 rule.
No, they don't.
Right. And so that's why I thought it was important. Now, I agree immutability, because if your copy isn't there, then what's the point?
Yeah, because you can make all the copies you want. If I can delete all of them, that's what I'm saying. That's why I still think mine trumps yours. But as you know, I'm a big fan of the 3-2-1 rule.
It's been a while since we talked about it.
Yeah. If you're not following the 3-2-1 rule, and you know where you really see this is in the SaaS world, where you see a product like Microsoft 365 saying, and people that love Microsoft 365 saying that, well, you don't really need backup because you have all these copies and you have all this stuff and you got all this history and you got all this stuff and you got this, you got even have retention policies where you can say that you can't delete it if it's, it's got to be at least 90 days, right? You can't delete it. So even if you delete it in your mailbox, it's still going to be there. And I say, yeah, but it's still in the same place. It's still it's not a copy. It's just when you delete an email in Microsoft 365, it sets a flag in the database that email is now deleted, and so it just doesn't display it to you. It's still there. And then if you use retention policies to make sure that it doesn't actually get deleted. It's still there in the same place. Yeah. It's just not being allowed to be deleted, which means that if something catastrophic happens,
it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
You know, luckily nothing catastrophic has ever happened in a Microsoft data center.
A bit of sarcasm there, Curtis.
A little bit of sarcasm. Yeah. And it's not just Microsoft. I don't want to pick on Microsoft. It's data centers, right?
Well, and the reason that I bring up the 3-2-1 rule is, especially with SaaS applications, which I'm guessing a lot of small businesses are leveraging, it becomes important to take that into consideration.
It does. Because if the SaaS service is basically saying backup is included, the question is, where is that backup being stored? Right? Is it being stored on different infrastructure? If it's not being stored on different infrastructure, I would like you to go watch the episode that we have on OVH, where it took out both the primary and the secondary, right? I don't care how amazing and how resilient your infrastructure is. Every infrastructure needs something that is like backup.
Yep.
Right? Is it in another location? Or are you relying on the primary as a copy, right? This is like snapshots aren't backup unless they're copied somewhere.
Yep. And is it a copy that you have access to, or is it just a copy that the SaaS provider is doing for their own disaster recovery purposes and doesn't actually let you recover data?
Yeah, a perfect example of that, again, is Microsoft 365 and to a lesser degree, Salesforce. Salesforce keeps changing, but Microsoft 365, they do apparently back up their data center for the purposes of DR for them.
Yep.
But that backup is not accessible to you.
Yep.
Right? I've clarified that multiple times with Microsoft. It is not accessible to you if you do something stupid.
Yep.
And I did that with a very big company that had several hundred Microsoft, so they had a big old bill. They were a very big, a decent sized customer, and the answer to them was no, right? That is not for you, right? Yep. So if that's the case for a company that has several hundred users, you with your 5 little email boxes in 365 are not going to be anything, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that it's outside. And that's why really I think, a third-party backup is really the only way to go. I don't care how amazing the included backup product is. Yeah. It's not going to give you that security of knowing that you have a copy that's in your control, even when the worst happens to that provider.
Yep.
Yeah. The next thing I'm going to say is just make sure that, look at pricing, look at costs. Make sure to include things like restores and retention. I would like to retain this amount of data. Some of these products, they only allow you to store 60, 90 days, right? I'd like to store a year, whatever your requirements are that you as a business have decided. Look and get the costs of that, right? Especially if you're deciding, and this is if you're doing cloud backup, it might be that restores aren't included in the price, or restores are included in the price, but then you have to pay the egress fee because they're running in a cloud provider that has egress fees. Yep. Make sure you look at the costs of restores. You might have additional costs if you want to do the restore quickly, because they're using something like Glacier, a deep archive type product that when you actually use it, you pay dearly to pull the data out of there, right?
The one other thing since we're talking about restores, is also consider if they give you a faster restore alternative, like Sneakernet or shipping you a device that contains your data, because that could help you quickly get back up and running. And yes, there might be an additional fee associated with it, but if it helps you get your environment back up and running significantly faster than pulling the data across, it may be worth it for you to consider.
Yeah, we recorded an episode a couple weeks ago with our friend that he only had, well, it was
a terabyte.
It was a terabyte of data, which again, this is a heavy user. Most of it was photos, and he'd been backing up for quite a while with Carbonite, and this is his first big restore, and he went to do it, and it took him a while. Do you remember how long it
I
was?
think it was like 22 days.
Yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. They
But
offered a
yeah.
a service to send a drive, and he just decided not to do it to
And
save him
yeah.
money.
Yeah.
But
And the other thing to also note is that wasn't fully Carbonite's fault. It was also some issues he had with his laptop doing the
it
restores, right?
it
So
does, yeah,
not blaming Carbonite fully for the slow restore performance, but
right.
it just is how the stars aligned in his particular case.
Yeah, I'm actually asking him to redo at least a portion of the restore to see if his newly minted internet service is gonna fix that.
Yeah.
So make sure you test restores. Make sure you test everything that's important to you. Make sure you test a large restore to see, and then you say, hey, this is how this worked out. How can we make it better?
Yeah.
Right. And all of this is an experience. It's a chance to experience the company's support system.
Yep.
Make sure you do that, and just realize that the support you get during the pre-sale process is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
So if it's crappy during then that's not really that's no good, no bueno.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else that we?
I think one other thing is I'm sure that you know other people in your industry. Talk to them, see what they use, right? See what's worked, what hasn't worked. Maybe they've tried a vendor and switched away.
Yeah.
But talk to them and see what is common in that space.
Yeah, do a lot of Reddit searches. There's a lot of stuff on Reddit, and also look at the vulnerability database and see the degree to which they have experienced vulnerabilities. Some companies have a lot more than others, and I think that indicates something about that company, right?
So I want your opinion on this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a small business owner, theoretically, right? I have 1,000 things going on.
Uh-huh.
I got to figure out backup.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worthwhile for me to actually go do this research, go look up all these discussion forums, go investigate? Wouldn't it be better to reach out to like an MSP and take their advice?
Yeah.
At least initially to understand what's going on, because I may not even know anything about backup.
I think that is a shortcut to a possibly better product.
At least
not all
short
MSPs
term.
are created equal. The idea behind the MSP is that they're making money off of this service, so they're not going to pick a company whose product doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's not true in all cases, but I do think that's better than not doing the research, right?
Yeah.
That's better than doing no research. And then you still have to research the reputation of that MSP.
Yeah.
Do they have a reputation for, only picking products that work well?
Yeah. Either
That's a
that
good
or
point.
like a VAR, right? I'm just thinking like a trusted partner you can go talk to get insights into what you should be doing, rather than trying to
Especially
figure
if you already have a trusted partner that can do that for you. Yes, agreed. There are a lot of cloud backup services that basically resell or get rebranded through MSP. So agreed. All right. Well, that is our answer for the best cloud backup solutions for small businesses.
It depends.
Summary: ones that work. All right. Well, thanks again for a great discussion, Prasanna.
Thank you, Curtis. And now I'm sure you're off to go enjoy the ginormous TV.
Maybe. We're in the middle of watching 6888, which is the fascinating unknown story of a group. So during World War II, there was called the Women Army Corps, and there was a black division of the Women's Army Corps, and they were given what was considered an impossible job, which was there was mail that had backlogged for months and had piled up, and were millions and millions and millions of undelivered letters, both good news from home, dead soldiers' letters back to their families, all the really important stuff. And they were given a job that multiple other groups had tried and failed. And they were given 6 months to do it. And they did it in 3. Never heard of this group. 6888 was the number of their company. and it was an all-black battalion.
Nice.
And amazing story, starring Olivia Pope as the commander, which Olivia Pope is quite well known. And it's a good, another great historical drama on Netflix. Anyway, so we're in the midst of watching that.
Awesome.
All right. I want to say thank you to our listeners. You are why we do this. I hope this episode was helpful. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.